Hello, hello. Everyone's slowly coming in. Welcome, welcome. Marmika, I'm just going to pin you to everyone's screens. Amazing. Okay, so I want to be mindful of time. So I think I'll give everyone maybe 30 seconds or so to get started or to get settled so we can get started. Get comfy, grab a cup of tea, coffee, notepad, whatever gets you in the mood to learn about law school acceptances. My name is Andrea. I'm with Juris Education, and thank you for joining us on tonight's webinar titled How to Get Accepted into Ivy League Law Schools. Before we get started with tonight's conversation, just a couple of housekeeping rules, so to speak. We're looking at running this webinar for about 45 minutes, so half an hour of conversation, and we always love to leave 15 minutes or so towards the end, just a Q&A session where you can speak to, well, type, kind of get those questions out there for Tamar and Mika, who are presenters tonight. I'll get them to introduce themselves momentarily. In terms of if this webinar is recorded, that's always the number one question. Yes, it is, and you will receive a recording within a day or two. We definitely encourage you to look back on it, share it with your network, add to your notes. It's yours to keep. Just to go over a brief summary. So what are we chatting about today? What are you learning about? So we'll be speaking about Ivy League law admissions insights. We'll speak about building a competitive application, LSAT success tips, letters of recommendation, and networking. So who are we? What is Juris Education? Why are we so qualified to speak about law school admissions? Again, whether this is your first time joining us or you've been here before, welcome. We're super excited to have you. We're a globally recognized law school admissions consulting firm offering comprehensive support from test prep to law school admissions and even bar exam tutoring. With a 94% acceptance rate, our students gain entry into the top law schools in the United States. Last cycle alone, our T14 acceptance rate was 34%, which is almost 6 times higher than the national average of 5.7%. We believe in starting the law school application process as early as possible. For college sophomores, we offer pre-law advising and profile development. This focuses on building each student's professional cover letter and resume to highlight their most meaningful experiences and elevate their profile. To help candidates stand out, we assist in enhancing transcripts and GPA, identifying organizations and internships, creating a timeline for LSAT and application prep, and pinpointing specific areas of interest. Our goal is to help students gain a strong foundation and understand what schools are looking for while building a portfolio that sets them apart from other applicants. While our counselors support students in building their profiles, our LSAT coaches work closely with them to provide personalized one-on-one tutoring. Students do take an official LSAT diagnostic test, so our tutors can assess their strengths and areas of improvement. This helps create a custom study plan structure for the days, weeks, and even months ahead. We tailor our approach to each student's unique needs and schedule, providing the right assessments and lessons as they become familiar with the test content, strategies, and format. Interim tests monitor and track progress, allowing us to modify study plans and build an upward trend leading to the official test date, whenever that may be. On average, we see a 12-point increase for 45 plus hours of tutoring, and we do offer a 165 plus LSAT score guarantee with our 60-hour program. Once we've helped build and shape an outstanding candidate, we support in creating the perfect application. Law schools review applications holistically, and we assist with every step of the way. Our support starts with detailed profile analysis, diving deep, into student stats and experiences. This guides the creation of a well-balanced list of target, safety, and reach schools. We also help build strong resumes and obtain letters of recommendation from the right recommenders. Our services continue through the interview process and include waitlist strategy support and scholarship assistance until students receive their acceptances. Our admissions counselors, who are also essay writing experts, will brainstorm, outline, and edit until supplemental essays and personal statements are perfect. These essays showcase the best aspects of our students, connecting their life journeys with themes of every school they apply to. Whether it's a main application or scholarship essays, we offer unlimited edits. Overall, our goal is to build the perfect candidate and application. We utilize every tool in our skill set to ensure the products we create with our students stand out from the rest. We're excited to assist you with the process and look forward to our consultations. With that being said, I just want to take a moment to pass it over to our wonderful panelists, Tamar and Mika, to introduce themselves.
Take it away.
Thanks. I'm Tamar. I use she, her pronouns. I feel like I've given this spiel so many times. I went to Vanderbilt for undergraduate. I'm from Chicago originally, so big Midwest energy all the time coming from me. I went to Vanderbilt as an undergrad and majored in gender studies and English with a minor in business. I had no interest at that time in going to law school. I then moved to Taiwan for a year as a Fulbright scholar and was there. And then I came back and did AmeriCorps in Chicago for a year and then decided to go to law school and landed at the University of Michigan Law School, mostly because I got a really great financial aid package that I couldn't say no to. So since then, I've been a Skadden Fellow in Los Angeles, working with LGBTQ foster youth. And then I started doing some policy on the juvenile justice side, but I am now a professor at a clinic at American University working on civil advocacy.
She's got a way cooler resume than
me. It's not true.
So hi, I'm Mika. I grew up in Nashville and then went to law school at U Chicago. So there's a little bit of a crossroads there. But yeah, I went to law school at University of Chicago. I am primarily an LSAT tutor. I had a 179, which was enough to get me off the wait list. I was also what you would recall a super splitter with a very low GPA. After that, I clerked for a judge and then worked as a corporate bankruptcy litigator for about 5.5 years, mainly in Delaware and New York City. And then I left the practice of law in 2020 during COVID, came back to teaching, and so now I do teaching and admissions consulting.
Oh, no, I think we're both doing it. So sorry.
Sorry about that.
No,
we both had the ability to control it, and so we both hit it at the same time. Yeah.
And I'd love to throw myself in there because I clicked at the same time too.
Great minds think alike. So yeah. Do I start?
You take this one? You take this one, I'll do the next. Yeah.
So mastering the Ivy League admissions process. One of the biggest things in this, and you'll hear us kind of say it over and over and over again tonight, is finding ways to stand out from the competition. Because once you, maybe it's not even once you reach a certain level, but lots of folks have amazing stories and amazing reasons to go to law school. And lots of folks have very similar GPAs and lots of folks have really similar LSAT scores. And so you really have to find a way to stand out and make your story compelling and different from the other people that are in the application pool. The schools are looking for more than just grades and more than just LSAT, although we'll talk about both of those things and we will stress how important they are. They are not important, but they're looking for candidates that are going to bring really unique perspectives, really unique experiences, things that will add different dimensions to law school classrooms, right? They're trying to build a law school class where, you know, you're stuck in your in all of your doctrinal classes with the same 1L students over and over and over again. And they're trying to like kind of create a good community and diverse perspective so that those classes can really come alive. So to be kind of a top contender for them, it's just really important to align why you're going to law school or who you are with some of the values the school has. I think that's generally true, but it can especially be true when every little bit that can set yourself apart is important.
So, right, when we talk about what is a standout admissions package for law school, right, there are a few big things, right? Obviously, there are numbers, right? Your undergraduate GPA and your LSAT score, right? But to get beyond the numbers, you have a interesting sort of new writing style sample that comes from the LSAT. It's not a graded thing, but it is something schools read. And you get to pitch yourself effectively, right? In your personal statement, in YX essays, and in your diversity statements, right? Schools want to see, right, either a standard and pattern of achievement right? A pattern of personal growth and greater achievement. And they definitely want to see the personality characteristics that would make you a contributor to the actual law school community, right? So things like club participation and leadership stuff does matter a lot here, right? And most of all, they, right, as Tam already said, they want to see uniqueness, right? They want to hear your story and figure out how you would fit into a very interesting and probably very diverse legal community. Okay.
So we're going to dive into all three of these things, but these are kind of the pillars of things we're going to talk about tonight, right? So one of them is academic excellence. Another one is leadership experience, and then we'll talk about community impact. So there are, you can think about your application in those buckets. You can think about them in different buckets than those, right? But those are kind of how we'll talk about them tonight. Academic excellence, meaning both LSAT and GPA. In some ways, that can also come through in your recommendation letters, right? It doesn't have to, but it can. Leadership experience can be on campus. It can be, I've been volunteering with this organization since I was in high school. It can be kind of lots of different ways that you show leadership. And I guess, again, that can also come through in recommendation letters. If you have been a leader in the classroom, if you, have a mentor who talks about your leadership skills and how they've seen your growth, that sort of thing. And then community impact, highlighting the contributions you've had and made that are really meaningful and show that you kind of are thinking beyond just yourself. Kind of oftentimes like either a public interest bent or something kind of like that. So to just start with the GPA, like Mika was saying, it's possible to not have the best GPA and get into an Ivy League law school, right? Like I will not tell you that it's not possible. Mika is our perfect example, right? Like not a great GPA, amazing LSAT score. It will be easier if you have a really high GPA, right? And I think if you look at the top schools, not even just the Ivy Leagues, but like, let's say the top 25, top 30, the GPA numbers for like the 25th percentile, the median, and the 75th percentile sometimes really only differ by like 0.01 of a GPA. And so we're really talking about sometimes some really high achieving students who kind of had their stuff together in undergrad. I think a lot of schools care about this partially because they think it will translate well to what kind of a student you'll be in law school, right? If you were a good student as an undergrad, that means you've built certain study skills, study habits, you take your classes seriously, you aren't kind of distracted by extracurriculars or overcommitted or kind of any of those things. And those things all come back to play in law school, right? Like there's extracurriculars again, there's externships, there's internships, there's balancing multiple classes, like all of those things. Or sometimes you're in a new city, you're like meeting new friends, you're dating new people, like all of those things come back. And so they want to see that you have a track record of knowing how to handle all of those things and also take school seriously. Because I think a lot of schools know that your GPA in law school also matters for landing a job afterwards. And they want to make sure that you're successful. I mean, on their good days, they want to make sure you're successful. On their bad days, they probably are like, we really want our students to have jobs afterwards because that impacts our numbers. So I think that that's kind of where their thinking is for GPA things. If you can maintain a high GPA, that's great. If you can have an upward trend, that's also okay. Like I think schools understand that starting freshman year, maybe you were pre-med and then realized that you hate chemistry and didn't do that well in orgo, or, things like that come up. And I think that's very normal, but the higher the GPA, the more it will help you in this process.
LSAT, right, is a very intense standardized test. All of you have taken the SAT, the ACT, or some sort of equivalent to that before. So the LSAT is that test, but for law school. The LSAT is, I guess, a little bit like the SAT and the ACT in that a lot of the difficulty involves the English language. But what the LSAT really tests at its core is critical thinking / logical reasoning skills, right? To be able to see how an argument fits together, what the pieces of an argument are, identifying different types of arguments, understanding how to interact with arguments, strengthen them or weaken them, draw conclusions from them, right? I just described basically a bunch of different question types that are on the exam. And then you have a reading comprehension section, which is more like the SAT and the ACT, but number one, much more complex, dense material, right? It's usually drawn from like academic journals or legal texts or legal, like actual case law. And the questions are less about the content itself and much more about like author intent and essay structure, right? So it's a very intense test. You have to use specialized resources, test prep companies, right? You have to sign up and get historical practice tests. That way you can actually use the historical questions to practice with. And I often recommend people give it months and months, right? Depending on how many hours per week that you can put into it. It's definitely not a bad idea to start thinking about it in your sophomore year, maybe at least familiarizing yourself, and definitely like, hopefully like digging in by middle of junior year at the latest. All right, let's roll over to the next slide. So there's 4 sections on the LSAT. One is called the experimental section. It's them testing out questions, and so it doesn't count. There are 3 scored sections, 2 of which are logical reasoning, right? And 1 of which is reading comprehension. Right, so I kind of already said these things, but right, logical reasoning involves a complex set of critical reasoning skills and the ability to get through really dense, often deliberately poorly written English. And then it's all about interacting with arguments, right? Constructing them, weakening them, strengthening them. And my cat is stepping all over stuff. Sorry. Okay. All right. And then reading comprehension, just to build on before, there's short essays. You can usually think of them as being like 3 to 5 paragraphs of maybe 10 lines each. And both of these sections, you have a 35-minute time limit. So in logical reasoning, you're answering usually 25 questions in 35 minutes. And no, not on the keyboard. And in reading comprehension, you're answering 27 questions in 35 minutes. So time is important here. So we'll hit the next slide, right? So treating this almost like, I don't know, whatever sport you play, right? Trying to practice like it's game day. That's a big part of prepping for the LSAT because it will be intensely time pressured. So you need to practice first, right, on an untimed basis to build skill, but then on an increasingly timed basis to actually get ready for the speed on the actual day. And we like strongly suggest that people regularly take timed practice tests. At the end of the day, there's no better guide to what your score will be than timed practice tests that you take under test-like conditions. So that's kind of the general like focus when we're doing time training. And yeah, this is also something that is long, right? It's going to be 3.5 hours long. It's a very long test, 4 sections, 35 minutes each with a short break in the middle. So taking practice tests is important for that. I remember when I first took the LSAT, I remember thinking, I was like, thank God I used to play chess competitively, right? Because like that's how mentally fatiguing doing something like it for 3.5 hours is. So this is, again, something that you really need to work on building skill. And that also comes from very regular practice, right? You don't build endurance by practicing every other week, right? You have to regularly try and push yourself. So I always emphasize that to students as well. Check in.
Amazing. So I just want to do a quick check-in of our audience to see if there's any questions thus far, if there's anything that you need us to rephrase or highlight, or if there's anything that you need us to focus on a little bit more. Right now, I don't see any questions, but again, please take the time to, and we encourage this, of course, get in those questions, any questions you have, whether that be about the application process or Ivy Leagues or the LSAT or any sort of your law school profile, any sort of questions that you may have, get those in. We'll make sure they get answered at least by the Q&A, if not during the Q&A.
Okay, back to me. Building a strong resume, something that Mika and I talk about in some of our the presentations we've done is that an application package is really a package, right? Like all pieces should speak to each other. And so part of building a resume is making sure that you are thinking about what it says and how it fills gaps in the rest of your application, how it speaks to the other pieces of your application, making sure that you're tailoring your experiences. And, you know, that could be as simple as thinking through kind of the values of the school. There are certain schools that really care about professional experience before you go to law school, right? There are certain schools that are like known for really wanting people to come in after having some kind of career experience. You could think about tailoring your application, either the verbs that start each bullet, right? Or you can tailor the like headings on your resume, right? To say professional experience instead of like leadership and extracurricular, right? So thinking about ways to make sure that you're making clear in your resume that you are really focused on a specific school and highlighting their values in the way that you're presenting yourself. So make sure that you focus on academic, extracurricular, legal related experience that align with the law school requirements. I will once again say I had no legal related experiences when I went to law school. I did not think I was going to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be a lawyer until I decided to apply to law school. Sometimes I still don't want to be a lawyer, right? So if you are someone who's like, I didn't major in poli-sci, I didn't do, you know, like the pre-law major or pre-law society or any of those things, that's okay. There are still ways to really sell yourself. And feel free to reach out to Juris Education. You can work with consultants like us, and we are happy to coach you through that. Make sure you highlight key skills. So that might be, you know, in kind of the verbs that you're using for every bullet. Highlight when you were researching, highlight when you were communicating, highlight when you took the lead on things. Those are all things that will bode well for your application, because those are skills that that lawyers need to have. And if you come in already having some of those things, they will be impressive for your resume. Crafting a personal statement. So along with my theme of your whole application package should speak to each other. Crafting a personal statement, I think, is often daunting because I think we're not used to writing the type of essay that is a personal statement, right? Lots of you will be used to, you know, college academic papers or research papers or you know, even like in kind of some informal writing, blog writing, but very few of us are really used to talking about like moments in our lives that changed us, or moments in our lives where we had an aha moment, or, you know, like it, not that it's a diary entry by any means, but it feels very personal in a way that we are not encouraged to write in kind of academic settings. So, so you'll want to spend some time kind of pre-writing, thinking about like, what stories do I have to tell? And I say often, everyone has multiple good personal statement topics in them. It is not like you're mining for like that one diamond that's deep within you and you have to find the perfect story and it has to have all of the perfect pieces for it to be the perfect personal statement. I think people get really hung up on that. The reality is we all have lots of stories we can tell. And so you just have to find one that feels good and authentic and feels like it's, you know, in some way coming naturally to you or highlights the right thing for you, or one of those sorts of things. And focus on that. And I sometimes have students who try a story and they're like, I love this story, but it's not right. Like, I can't write it well. It's feeling overwhelming, or like there are too many details. It's just not working for me. Great. Let's pivot to one of the other stories that was on your list of things that felt like you could talk about. So In any story that you pick, you'll want to highlight some sort of personal growth, maybe a challenge that you overcame. Like I said before, a moment that you changed your mind can be really powerful. Sometimes, like if you had kind of an aha moment of wanting to go to law school, or you had a really poignant story about, doing work and having some sort of interaction with the legal system or justice systems or something, and that moment being a moment where you realized that you wanted to be a lawyer. Those are all things that can make really great personal statement stories. Ivy League schools are looking for really clear narrative, really clear writing generally, right? They want to see good writers. Writing is a key part of being a lawyer. They want to see good growth. They want to see great ambition. I think that really can sometimes be different for Ivy League schools versus other schools, and also a commitment to leadership and service. Not everyone will have a commitment to service. I will say that I see some candidates who are like, I really want to do tax law or I really want to do IP, and I am not really a service person, and I don't really want to do a ton of service. And that's, that is what it is. And that's okay. You don't have to kind of create a sob story that isn't true about I worked with orphans, and that. If that's not your story, that's not your story. Don't make things up. But if there is an element of service that was key to getting you to the law school front door, then make sure you highlight that, and think about the ways that your personal story is interacting with your resume and the other pieces of your application. So showcasing your extracurriculars, this can be kind of in a variety of ways, right? Some schools ask for write a paragraph or write, a short, a one pager about an impactful extracurricular you are involved in and why that's important. Some schools lots of schools don't ask for that. Sometimes you can highlight an extracurricular in your personal statement if that was part of your growth story or impactful story or whatever. Sometimes it'll come through in that. And then at the very least, it will come through in your resume, right? And I guess I keep kind of saying and it might be in your recommendation letters, depending on your rec letters. But at the very least, your resume, you'll want to highlight the roles you've had in positions. If you were a member and then you grew into, a committee chair and then you turned into president, you'll want to list all of those roles, right? You don't want to just use the verbs that make, that you think clarify that you had a big role. You want to show I've been involved in this organization for 2 years, for 3 years, for 4 years. I started as a member, I grew. You can sometimes even put in parentheses, member, 2 semesters or 8 semesters or whatever, chairperson, 2 semesters. So it's clear how long you are in each role. And that can be really helpful to demonstrate leadership and how long you held positions. You want to emphasize how your involvement made a difference. You can sometimes do that on a resume, right? You can say leading to X outcome, leading to, increasing the number of volunteers 3-fold, or, whatever that is, leading to successfully fundraising $1 million, whatever it is. You'll want to kind of not just emphasize what you did, but why it mattered or what the outcome was.
Do I take over for this one?
Sure.
Cool. Securing strong letters of recommendation. So usually schools will request at least 2 academic recommenders, right? And then 1 recommender that can be a personal one, work related, hobby related, just somebody that knows you well and can give you a strong character recommendation. So you should try to have relationships with professors such that they can genuinely write something about you, right? And it's as simple as maybe in your favorite class, go to the office hours regularly, right? Just get in front of the professors so that they don't just see that you're an A+ student, they also know you to some degree, right? Because that does come through in letters of recommendation, right? It's usually I wouldn't say super obvious, but relatively obvious whether you're just a student that got an A in the class or you're a student that the professor got to know a fair bit. So try to engage in those sort of relationships. That said, right? Not everybody has super tight relationships with professors. Some people are out of school already. In that case, yeah, find just somebody that you did really, really well for in multiple classes, and usually say, look, I don't have anyone else that can write one. Most professors will be like, I totally understand. I'll do what I can. And yeah, in terms of your other recommender, I would really try to emphasize, like, don't just think about like who seems like an important recommender, right? Think about like who can genuinely talk about you a lot as a person, right? Because usually, even if your academic recommenders know you, they don't know you that well, right? Whereas this personal recommender can be somebody that really knows you and has for a long time, right? Like that's a powerful person to write a statement, right? They can really attest to who you grew into over time. So think about those things when it comes to the letters.
So networking for Ivy League success. This is something that I feel like I hadn't thought about enough, and I wish I had when I was applying for law schools, right? So I think there's so many things you can learn from alums, and to be completely honest, the legal profession is really small. So I would say almost no networking opportunity is a waste of time. You don't know when those people will pop back up, when, when they might be helpful for you, when they might be able to answer questions in the future. But at this stage, it can be really helpful to talk to them, to hear about their law school experiences, to kind of learn more about the school and the fit and things they wish they had known about, when they were applying to the school. Some people have really great connections with their admissions counselor or the admissions dean or whatever. Some people at Michigan were really, really close with our admissions dean. And so they can sometimes like put in a good word or encourage you to kind of drop their name in your YX law school essay. Those sorts of things can go a really long way. And if you are able, or if you are local, or, if schools are kind of coming to major cities near you, you can attend events, post-COVID, not that we're exactly post-COVID, but since COVID, people are doing lots of webinars online. I feel like that wasn't so much of a thing when I was applying to law school, but lots of things are now online. There are ways to engage with admissions counselors in that setting. There are panels you can go to. Sometimes like LSAT puts on panels, or there are kind of like congregations of law schools that do events together. And you want to just show genuine interest. You want to build relationships with these people. You want to, show up eager to learn from them. You don't want to kind of ask the basic questions that you can find online, but have some thoughtful questions prepared. Things like, what's your favorite part about being an admissions officer at this school? Or what's like one of the qualities that your students have that you don't think other student bodies have so much. There are some really fun questions that you can ask admissions officers that, they get to brag about their school, and you get to learn lots from them about kind of that school's personality. And hopefully at the end of it, they will remember your name fondly, and that will always be a good thing in life, in the legal world, but also in your admissions process.
Right. So there are a few optional essays. Some schools do require diversity statements now. Other schools have it as an optional one. But I always try to emphasize to people that diversity statements are not just about one thing. They're about the whole thing, right? And you should think about what sets your life apart. Like I have a student earlier today who has been like a sort of primary caretaker for his severely disabled sibling for like 12 years, right? And he like thought that he didn't have anything to write a diversity statement about. And I was like, no, like that's a very unique life experience, especially growing up and taking care of someone else. And that's definitely something that's worth talking about. So think about just stuff that makes you different. That's it. Stuff that happened in your life that sets you apart, or experiences. Other essays, we call them addendums. You might want to address a low GPA score or a low LSAT. often I have some students who might have done some community college that they either weren't ready for, didn't take very seriously. And then they went to undergrad, but those community college hours got counted into their GPA, even though, right, like it feels like that shouldn't matter. And honestly, it kind of shouldn't. Regardless, though, that's the way it is. And so that is sometimes worth addressing, right? If there are unusual situations that have caused your GPA, deaths in the family, those are often something to potentially bring up. I rarely tell people to write them about LSAT scores, but you can, and again, it's an unusual circumstance thing. And then there's one, and then you might also, hopefully you won't, but if you have what we would call a character and fitness issue, then you should absolutely write an addendum addressing it. And so that would absolutely count for sort of any crime you've been convicted of that rises above like a petty misdemeanor, or any other like serious issues. You should address them proactively. And then there's one last class of essay called YX essays, as in why Harvard, why Yale, why Stanford. This is just a chance for you to sort of write about, it's like usually a short one-page essay, and we would encourage you to have a good reason to write it. It's not enough to just say, like, I want to go to Harvard because Harvard is Harvard and there's lots of cool stuff happening at Harvard, because that's not really news to the people that work there already. Things as simple as, I want to go to Boston College because I'm from Boston. I currently go to Boston College, and I want to live in Boston and work in Boston after graduating from law school. That is an incredibly effective why Boston College essay. That is probably the most effective why Boston College essay. So if you want to go to a regional school or work in a specific region that's, that school is known for feeding, that's a great reason to bring it up. Things like having family, being from that community originally, those are great things to bring up. And obviously any specific programs that school does, right? If there's a particular legal clinic that you are like really stoked to get involved with, absolutely write about that. But to put it bluntly, don't just blow smoke up their asses, right? Like, give them real reasons why they are unique compared to other law schools for you. Yeah, and so that's kind of the range of typical optional essays. All right, roll over.
So a couple of pitfalls, we've talked about some of these already, but focusing too much on academics without highlighting leadership or service. These law schools really see themselves not just as academic institutions, but as places where they're building national world leaders. And, whether that's true or not is a separate conversation, but that's really how they see themselves. They really think that they're in the business of not just stellar academics, but also really ambitious, service-oriented or leadership-oriented individuals. And so you want to make sure that you're highlighting those things in your application, not just that you know how to study really well and test really well, right? Failure to take or to tailor your application to the school's values. Some schools really do have very different values, and you can see, and they're not hiding what those are, right? A lot of those you can determine from their websites, from their social media, they kind of will like use certain buzzwords, right? Like Michigan is really big into the Michigan difference. They're really big into collegiality. Other schools, like I said before, are really big into caring that you have professional experience going into the law school, and you'll see that their average age for admittance is higher, right? There are certain values that schools will have that will be, if you do have personal statement stories or either things on your resume or kind of in any piece that you can highlight that really show that there's alignment there, that can be really impactful for your application materials. Like Mika was saying, don't rely on generic or impersonal letters of recommendation. Do not snooze on how important letters of recommendation can be. They can be so, so, so important. Don't just ask like a friend of a friend to write one for you because they worked with you one time on one small project and maybe they remember you. Don't do that. Don't do, oh, my parents' friend is a judge and I've talked to him at dinner one time and, so I'm going to have him write one because he's a fancy judge. Don't do that. You really want people, it does not matter what position they have or how fancy their, the letters are that come after their name. You really want someone who can talk about what kind of a person you are, what kind of work ethic you have, and really dig in with some examples. Those are really compelling recommendation letters. And then finally, don't neglect the importance of networking and building connections. There are really excellent ways to network and meet alums and, then name drop them later, or just get to know the admissions officers, make your face known, make your interests clear, be authentic about it. And those things can be really helpful.
Whew. So, yeah, final submissions. So I don't think we've said, but all of this stuff is typically pulled together in something called the Credential Assembly Service, right? It's run by the Law School Admissions Council. They're the people that make the LSAT and administer it. And they also are the clearinghouse for the application process. So yeah, this is a good chance to stop, pause, read all of your essays one last time, right? Are the tones consistent? Are you presenting any inconsistencies, maybe in facts that might stand out to a discerning eye, which admissions officers have? So think about everything you're selling and pitching, basically, right? Think about what your resume says about you. Think about what your essays say about you, and make sure they're harmonizing well. Right. Remember that things like a personal statement are typically very universal. You don't need to tailor it. But if you are doing any tailored stuff like YX essays, right, just double check and make sure you didn't upload the wrong one, because that is much easier to screw up at than you think. I actually have been applying to potentially teach at law schools next year, and I'm pretty sure I actually did that exact screw up once. So be careful. But really just revision is the key to making impressive written materials, period, end stop. Essays, arguments, briefs, and anything. So take a chance to pause, revise, harmonize, and say, this is what represents me. Yeah.
Amazing. So I'm going to step right in and get right into the Q&As. We have a ton of questions. We're about to be a little bit over time, but I think we have a ton of questions. Let's get this done. Cool. Awesome. So first question, this person says, I have a question about being a non-traditional student in Ivy Leagues. How much does age decrease your likelihood of getting in? Any strategies for speaking to that in your app materials?
Mika, I'm excited to hear what you have to say about this. My take is that schools love older candidates. I think they are more mature. They have more experiences to talk about in their classes, right? It's really great when students can say yeah, I have had to go to court for something, or I know what I had experience with contract law because I've had to write contracts or read contracts or review contracts or something like that. The more experience is really seen as a plus in law school admissions instead of a minus. And I think I really only think of it as boosting your application. Don't think of it as something that detracts from your application. The experience is really, really helpful. And law school admissions know that.
I completely agree with that. I think having a few years of work experience is never bad. And I don't think having 10 or 15 year plus of work experience is bad. Definitely not from the perspective of an admissions officer. I think they like having classes that are diverse in age, right? They like having older students provide different perspectives. I think that they really like students that are used to working 9-to-5 jobs, right? Because if you approach law school with a very 9-to-5, I'm going to go in, I'm going to work, and then I'm going to go home mentality, you'll actually do very, very well. Some schools are known for really favoring non-traditional students. So like Northwestern is I think, very well known for having a strong preference for students that have worked before, and a few others spread out. But I don't think any school looks down on it in any way, shape, or form. I think as long as you've been doing interesting stuff that you can talk about in a personal statement, it's a selling point. Yeah.
Awesome. Please let us know if that answered your question or if you have any follow-ups. So we have the next question says, do we have to go to law school already knowing what type of law we want to practice?
This is a big no. Absolutely not. And also, I think sometimes students think they know, but most people just haven't been exposed to that many types of law before they've gone to law school. And so it's kind of like picking a major as an undergrad. Like you might go in with one idea and come out with a totally different idea. I think in my personal experience, I think the only exception I have to that is like usually public defenders come in knowing they want to be public defenders and often leave as public defenders. That is a pipeline that often stays true, but otherwise, like I went in knowing I wanted to do public interest and came out very much doing public interest, but doing child welfare, which was not the area that I thought I would be doing. So I would not be stressed if you can't name a specific area. And I think admissions officers know that even if you do name a specific area, you might or maybe or possibly or likely will not stick with that area, and that's okay.
100% agreement. Yeah, it would be incredible to even think that students have that level of knowledge coming in. And like, even if you did, like I went to bankruptcy and restructuring, but then there's an immediate split between the litigation side and the deal side of that work. And then if you're on the litigation side, there's then a split between debtor, bank/secured creditor work, creditor committee work, and then exterior, factor work, basically other interested parties like unions or sureties. So even if you said you wanted to be a bankruptcy attorney, an appropriate response would be what type, and then you'd say litigation or corporate, then it would be what type of that, and then there'd probably be another what type of that down further anyways. So no expectation. If you have specific interests, that's great. But yeah, people change them all the time, and a lot of more people go into big law than said they wanted to go into big law.
Great. Okay. I'm going to just continue rolling with these questions. Do Ivy League schools take into account factors such as why non-traditional students might not do as well on standardized tests, or do they deny applicants solely on not meeting LSAT requirements?
I can confidently say that most of them do, unless by law they're required not to. Most schools care about the paths that bring people to the law. The law as an institution and as a field is very wealth privileged. Not just when you're inside of it, but the people entering into it tend to be very, very wealth privileged. And law schools are aware of that. And I think they especially, that is one area that they especially look for diversity on, is just not being wealth privileged, I would say. But there is no doubt that schools take these things into account. Yeah.
Awesome. So do Ivy League schools frown upon graduating in 3 years when looking at applications?
I wouldn't think so.
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
I do think that, we actually had a number of people at Michigan who had graduated in 3 years. I think, like we've been saying this whole time, I think having some work experience in between a 3-year graduation and going to law school can be helpful instead of going to law school at 21. But I don't think that as a general thing, schools frown upon graduating in 3 years. I think in a lot of ways, it's really impressive that you were able to finish in 3 years, right?
Awesome. So this one's really great. The next question is about letters of recommendation. I have a professional recommender who worked alongside me as a co-teacher last year. There was no direct oversight from a higher up, and I know he is a skilled writer. So I think he could best speak to my leadership skills. Would it be considered non-traditional to pick a coworker as a recommender?
Maybe a little, but I also think that sounds like a great recommender. Yeah, I think that they know you as a person, they worked with you, they can testify to both things in a really like articulate and effective way. That sounds great. Yeah.
Same response for me. That's totally fine. I have a student doing this year with a colleague because they didn't have a supervisor at their last job, and that is what it is. And if they're a great writer and they can speak to your work, then that's really what you need.
Awesome. So if a person with a low GPA but a high LSAT score got into law school, but not someone who had a high GPA, high LSAT, how did the former likely stand out?
I think that's too speculative.
Should we do the law school, the lawyer thing of it depends?
Yeah, I can't speculate. There's too many ways that could happen for me to like really identify one in particular. Yeah, I would probably say that the personal statement played a big role, but I wouldn't be able to say how.
I think that's also a fair response because there are multiple ways it could happen, right? But it is definitely possible. I think that's something this person can take out of the question, or the answer, I should say. Is it helpful to network and build relationships with admissions officers at the school you want to go to before applying?
I think yes, although I wouldn't say it's necessary, but I do think it's helpful. There are a number of ways to do this, right? And some schools kind of go about it differently, but I know that like at Michigan, it was very possible to kind of build a relationship with our dean. And that was like seen as a really positive thing. And then if you kind of kept that relationship in the future, you could tell the dean to kind of look out for applications or put in a good word for things. So I think my answer is, I guess I will do the same thing and say it depends, but I do think it is generally helpful networking. And as much as you can build relationships with admissions officers and alums and be thoughtful and smart with your questions and, don't be overbearing, don't like waste their time, don't, be overzealous to the point of annoyance. But if you're being thoughtful and strategic and lovely in your interactions with them, that will definitely be a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I always tell people, I wrote 4 letters over 4 months to get off the U Chicago wait list. I was just persistent. I would say I was just doing that, but on the back end, which is I made it clear, like, they had a wait list group, and each time they reevaluated it, there was a new email from me, right? So making your name known and being somebody that like, okay, you know what, if I have the chance to admit this person, I'm gonna take it. That's the sort of relationship you want to develop with them. Yeah.
Okay, a few more questions. I'm not sure how much we could really dive into this one because we could actually do a whole webinar on it, but what types of legal experience do law schools want to see? For example, Georgetown law.
We're going to do a lot of it depends tonight, but it's going to depend. And I will once again say I walked into law school with no legal experience. I walked in with teaching experience. And that was really it. So I would say that you don't have to walk in with any legal experience, but you can walk in with legal experience. Sometimes that looks like summer internships at law offices, right? Sometimes that looks like legal assistant positions. Sometimes that looks like being a paralegal. Sometimes that looks like government work, right? Policy think tank work, right? Anything that's kind of legal adjacent or where there are a lot of lawyers working. So you can kind of get a sense of like what you can do with a law degree, even if it isn't writing laws or litigating, right? I think any of those things can be helpful for you personally to figure out, like, A, is law school right for me? B, what type of law would I want to practice? Or what would my practice maybe look like? There's lots of different ways of lawyering. So that's all really great information for you to have. But it can be nice for law schools to see, like, okay, this person has tried, has been around a lot of lawyers or has thought about different legal organizations, and they still want to go to law school. That likely means that they have been thoughtful in their decision to apply, which is, I think, can be a good thing, though, again, not 100% necessary.
Yeah. I will say it seems shockingly easy to find internships with judges. They just seem to like having free hands around to do stuff. So that's a great one to just, as on a practical level, I am fairly certain that you could probably find an internship with a local judge. So give that one a go. But yeah, I think Tamara said it best. It can be a ton of different things, right? Depending on your interest, right? Maybe you volunteer at an immigration law clinic. Maybe you volunteer at a domestic violence hotline, right? Maybe you do a judicial internship. Maybe you work as an intern at a law firm for a summer. A lot of people work as paralegals after graduation if they want a kind of an intermediate career between undergrad and law school. That is not unusual at all. So just kind of do something in the legal area that also vindicates your values to some degree. Yeah.
Awesome. We have 2 more questions. So let's keep going. Maya asks us, I'm a freshman, but sophomore by credits. They, I apologize, they're graduating earlier than those in their class. During the extra time after graduation, what would be a good course of action to gain experience in the field? So would you recommend paralegal work, internships, working as a receptionist? Yeah. Any sort of thoughts for Maya?
Yeah, kind of what we just said before. Paralegal is definitely something you can do. And yeah, all of the time, I think we kind of just answered this question. Sorry.
Yeah, we'll do the it depends again also. You should do something that you're interested in. Like, I truly believe, find something that excites you. And if that is legal, great. If that's not legal, that's okay. You will be a lawyer for the rest of your life. There's no need to run towards it right now. If you're hey, I want to take a year to do something else, that's okay. And I think law schools actually have a lot of appreciation for that.
Awesome. One last question. I think I know what you're going to say, but is it frowned upon by law schools if undergrads were to go directly to law school after graduation?
I don't think it's disfavored in any way. I think the vast majority of law school applicants are coming directly out of undergrad. Maybe not the vast majority, but a majority of them are. So that is the normal life cycle from that perspective. I do think that having work experiences, especially if you do 2 to 4 years, is very much considered a positive. But I also don't think it's oh, you're not going to get into Harvard if you don't work for 4 years. That's absolutely not the case. I think probably the majority of Harvard's class has no work experience. So yeah, I don't think you should work solely for the purpose of buffing your law school resume. I do think you might want to work to make sure that you want to go to law school. Yeah. I think that's the big thing that schools take away is oh, you've been working for 4 years and you still want to do this. You've had a chance to do something else. You've had a look at what the law is like and you still want to be here. That helps. Yeah.
Amazing. We're right at the hour, so I think this is a really great time to wrap things up. Tamar, Mika, thank you for being here. Thank you for once again sharing your wonderful insights to our audience. I'm so sorry if you have more questions. Unfortunately, we will not be able to get to them tonight, but we do recommend you book a free consultation and speak to one of our admissions experts to kind of do a further deep dive on on whatever the question may be. And of course, if you want specific advice, for your case, again, that's a perfect time to book a free consultation as well. With that being said, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.